Afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the ANU Indonesia Project Global Seminar. Good morning as well to those of you joining us from Indonesia, and Eid Mubarak. I hope you had a joyful celebration and a restful break with time to reflect. My name is Nurina Merdikawati. You can call me Dika. I'm joining you from the Australian National University here in Canberra, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the Nganwal and Ngambri people as the traditional custodians of the land where I am now, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And we are very grateful for the support of the Australian National University and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. In celebrating International Women's Day, our seminar today will explore the minimum marriage age law and the lived realities of child marriage in Indonesia. The 2026 theme, Balance the Scales, calls for fair and inclusive justice, reminding us of the importance of addressing child marriage and ensuring that every girl in Indonesia has the opportunity for a safe and empowered future. We are very fortunate to have an excellent panel of speakers with us today. Adriana Bella, a research fellow from the RC Center of Excellence for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, CIVO, at Curtin University, who is very close to adding doctor to her name, so congrats, Bella. We are also joined by Dr. Nilu Putu Maitra Agastya, Director of the Center on Child Protection and Wellbeing at Universitas Indonesia, Puskapa, along with Andrea Adi, an independent public policy researcher, and Shaila Tikan, Senior Research Associate at Puskapa. So together they will share quantitative and qualitative insights to deepen our understanding of how legal reforms and institutional practices shape the persistence of child marriage in Indonesia. We're truly grateful for their time and generosity in being with us today. So a quick note on the format, we'll have a Q&A session after the presentations. So feel free to submit your questions anytime using the Q&A box. So I'll moderate and bring them in after the talks. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Bella to begin, who'll speak for about 20 to 30 minutes, and followed by Agus and her team for about the same time. And then hopefully we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes for Q&A. So over to you, Bella.
Yeah. Thank you, Mbak Dika. I'm waiting for the presentation. Yeah. So, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this virtual global seminar. Today, I will present my work on the impact of Indonesia's first minimum marriage age law in 1974, and I will begin by briefly describing the child marriage condition in Indonesia, and also the historical and institutional context surrounding the first establishment of minimum marriage age law in Indonesia. So every year, around 12 million girls are married, and that is roughly around 22 child brides every minute. So child marriage is still a global issue, and it is even put in SDG 5.3 to end child marriage by 2030. So why is it a global concern? First, child marriage is a violation of human rights by denying children their protection, education, and nutrition, and putting responsibilities under the marriage. And moreover, child marriage is also widely recognized as it is linked to multiple disadvantages like lower educational attainment, higher risk of domestic violence, and also worse health outcomes for mothers and their offsprings. So now, take a look into the case of Indonesia. Indonesia is a unique case of child marriage because it has the fourth highest number of child marriage in the world, with more than 32 million under 18 child marriages among women aged 20 to 24 years old. So in 2018, around 1 in 9 women aged 20 to 24 years old married before age 18, and the issue for girls is much more prominent than for boys, in which only around 1% of boys had child marriage in the same age bracket. And taking closer into the national level of child marriage, there is a huge heterogeneity of child marriage across provinces in Indonesia, which can range around 4% in the most developed area like Jakarta, up to almost 20% in Sulawesi. And more broadly, provinces in Sulawesi and Kalimantan, they have generally higher prevalence of child marriage with around 14 to 19%. Mbak Lydia, sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I already explained this one. Next. So one of the motives of child marriage in Indonesia is social norms. Even though much of the evidence comes from earlier periods, particularly up to the 1980s, but these norms are deeply rooted and may still be relevant until now. So, daughters were perceived as potential sources of social disgrace in the family, either by having intimate relationship outside the wedlock or by remaining unmarried until socially acceptable ages. So in response, parents often arrange marriage early, typically soon after menarche, in the old period. And late marriage was often interpreted as a failure of both the parents and the daughters itself. So early marriage is seen as a way to safeguard family reputation by protecting both premarital chastity and preventing daughters being old maids. Next. And another potential motive of child marriage in Indonesia is economic drivers. So again, this happened in the past up to around 1980s, but maybe still relevant until now. So as parents expected children to provide support even after marriage, daughters were more likely to be engaged in domestic and care work rather than the income generating activities. As a result, daughters were perceived as having lower economic returns. And in this case, marrying of daughters early is seen as reducing the cost in the family because their return to investment in keeping in the family longer is also low anyway. And also, by marrying off the daughters early, they can also have the potential benefits by bringing additional labor from the son-in-law. So, before going into the Indonesia's first minimum marriage age law in 1974, let me first set the context by describing child marriage in the 1970s. So at that time, girls often married soon after menarche or after the first menstruation, often through arrangements made by the parents. And in the 1970s, statistically compared to other East and Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia had the lowest mean age at first marriage for women at around 19 years old, and the prevalence of female teenage marriage for age 15 to 19 was also the highest in the region at more than 37%. Let me now turn into the policy context surrounding the first minimum marriage age law. So first, before the first minimum marriage age law in 1974, there was no universal minimum marriage age for all Indonesians. So the Dutch colony established minimum marriage age only for Christian Indonesians, and it was 15 years for girls, but it was not really followed until the independence. And since independence, women's organizations like Koani, they urged the establishment of minimum marriage age, but only until the government stated the family planning program in 1968, they supported the establishment of minimum marriage age. And the first minimum marriage age law was a compromise between the support of the women's organization like Koani, who stated the minimum marriage age of 18 years old for girls, and also the Muslim lobby groups who opposed the fixed age limit, particularly because they said Islamic teaching does not set a specific age for marriage. So then the government set the 16 years old minimum marriage age under this law, which I will explain later. So in 1974, Indonesia established its first minimum marriage age law. And this was the first national level regulation for all Indonesians. The law set the minimum age at 19 years old for men and 16 years old for girls. And however, marriages below these ages were still possible through a court dispensation requested by parents. And the law also stated that marriages under 21 should still require parental permission. So the policy did not aim to eliminate child marriage because it still allowed dispensation, but it made formal marriage below the threshold of 16 years old for girls more costly and regulated. Okay, next. So even though the policy or the law did not aim to eradicate child marriages, the law might potentially had direct and indirect effects on shaping the behaviors in the society. So first, the direct effect operates through increased costs and uncertainty, because marriages below the legal age require court dispensation, and this introduces additional cost of time, administration, and financial costs. So early marriage became more costly at that time. And indirectly, the law sets the signaling effect that later marriage is socially preferred. At the time, people were not aware of the consequences of child marriages, and having this law provided a signaling that early marriage was less desirable due to its consequences on children. So given this policy context, this study aims to examine the impact of Indonesia's first minimum marriage age law on child marriage and education, particularly on women in Indonesia, because child marriage is overwhelmingly concentrated among girls in Indonesia. And to our knowledge, this is the first causal analysis of Indonesia's initial minimum marriage age in 1974. So regarding the policy timing, the main marriage age law was first established on 2 January 1974. However, this was not yet operational in practice. And in April 1975, the government introduced the implementing regulation, which became effective on 1 October 1975. And based on the nature of policy implementation, there was a waiting period of almost 2 years from the first law to the practical regulation. And this waiting period was referred as the law without law period, and that the 1974 law did not have any practical effect. So in my analysis, I used the effective implementation of the regulation, which is on 1 October 1975. So for the source of the data, I pulled cross-sectional data from Indonesian National Socioeconomic Survey, or SUSNAS, covering the period of 2018 to 2021, due to the complete data of child marriage and also the information of date of birth. And the sample focuses on women born between 1951 and 1967. So these were cohorts who were around the policy cutoff of 16 years old at the policy implementation in 1975. The outcomes measured here are child marriage and educational outcomes. And we also employ method that analyze the causal impact of the minimum marriage age law using the regression discontinuity design. And we have dealt with the issue of the heaping in year of birth and potential anticipation effect with, I may not discuss this in detail. But in essence, this approach compares women who were just below, who were affected by the law, and who were just above 16 years old on the date of implementation in 1975. So let me start with the main results on child marriage. So the reform reduced marriages below age 16 by 2.2 percentage point. In relative terms, this is about 18% reduction from the pre-reform level. And we can say that this 18% reduction is a modest effect, especially when comparing to the similar policy in Mexico or in some US states with more than 40% reduction. However, we should also acknowledge that the nature of the law did not fully prohibit child marriage, and because of the dispensation, and also the policy acted more as a constraint rather than a complete ban, which may be different with other countries' contexts. The reform also increased the mean age first marriage by about 0.44 years, or roughly around 5 months. And to put into perspective, the mean age at marriage in Indonesia increased by about 3 years over 4 decades, from 1970 to 2010. So it was a slow move. And this implies that the 1975 reform accounts for around 15% of this long-run increase over the 4 decades, which is quite big. So we also examined the impact of minimum marriage age law on marriages under various ages, and the effect of the law extended beyond the legal threshold at 16 years old, which I will explain in the next slide. So here I show that I examined the effect of minimum marriage age policy, which extends beyond the intended cutoff of 16 years old. So each point here represents the change in the likelihood of being married below 10 to 35 as a result of the law implementation. And as expected, we see a clear reduction in marriages under 16 years old. But importantly, the effects continue beyond the legal cutoff, indicating that the reform also contributed to delaying marriages until later ages. And the largest impact was at age 18 and 22, suggesting that this coincides with the age of finishing high school and finishing undergraduate degree. So this is also in line, So this story is also in line with the fact that education is a natural outside option of early marriage, which I will present on the results on education after this. So exposure to the law also led to improvements in education outcomes. The likelihood of completing senior high school increased by 0.8 percentage point, or 11% relative to pre-reform mean. And more notably, higher education completion increased by 1.5 percentage points, which corresponds to 29% of increase relative to pre-reform mean. And years of schooling also increased by about 0.23 years. And these results are consistent with the idea that continuing education is the easiest outside option of early marriage, so that a delay in marriage can translate into a gain in completing education. I also examined whether the effects vary across different contexts. So first, by the location of the respondents, because I didn't know the location at birth, so I used the current location at the time of interview as the proxy. And the effects are larger. The effects of the minimum marriage age law are larger in urban areas. So some of the potential reasons are that there were stronger women's movement in cities compared to the rural areas, and also greater state presence and better enforcement and information in the urban areas compared to the rural areas. And also there were more education opportunities for women in the urban areas, so that they could accept this law more generally in the urban areas compared to the rural areas. And secondly, I also compare the effects between regions. So I determined West Java and Madura as having the lowest age at marriage in 1970s. So I compare the effect of the law in these two areas, in respondents being born in these two areas. And I saw that the impact of the minimum marriage age law was larger for women born in these areas, mostly because of the higher baseline rates of early marriage in these areas. So in conclusion, first, the practical implementation of the 1974 law reduced very early marriage and delayed marriage timing. Also, the effects extend beyond the legal threshold of 16 years old, suggesting that the policy influenced broader behavior. And the reform also led to improvements in educational completion or attainment, which is consistent with the idea that education is a credible outside option of early marriage. And effects were also stronger in urban areas and also in regions with entrenched child marriage norms. And importantly, even though the law was imperfect, it still has dispensations, and potentially there were also some informal marriages in that period. It still contributed to a shift in behavior, even though it's some modest effect. And this first implementation of minimum marriage age in 1974 contributed to an ongoing shift in attitudes towards later marriage. For example, which is reflected in the raise of minimum marriage age to 19 years old for girls in 2019, which will be explained by the Puskapa team. So thank you very much. That's all for my presentation. If you want to see more analysis, you can check my working papers. Thank you. Over to you, Mbak Lydia.
Thank you, Bella. That's very insightful. Um, I'm going to then continue what Bella has mentioned about the 2019 marriage law reform. So hi everyone, good morning, selamat pagi. My name is Agas. I'm from Puskapa. I am here with my two colleagues, Andrea and Shaila, who will be then presenting our presentation on child marriage today. So I will briefly outline our presentation today. Next slide, please. Andrea and Sheila will present the two studies that Puskapa has conducted, one in 2022 and one in 2025, related to marriage dispensation cases and marriage dispensation and registration cases in Indonesia. And then to end the presentation, I will also discuss the policy takeaways from the two research on child marriage. So I will now give the opportunity to Andrea to present our first study. Thank you.
Thank you, Margus. Hi, I'm Andrea. It's an honor to be here presenting the study that was conducted in 2022, which focuses more on finding inclusive ways in addressing child marriage. And before I begin, we would also like to acknowledge and pay respect to our late co-author and team leader of the study, Dr. Santi Kusumaningrum. Her leadership was instrumental to this work. And so before we begin, maybe we can get like a big picture on the marriage law. Thank you for Bella for sharing the study findings. So here I want to more give more like a pathways for marriage registration in Asia, based also recently on the 2019 amendment of the law. So here you can see there are like maybe two pathways. Either you are above 19 years old or like before under 19 years old. As you can see, when you are under 19 years old, if you want to marry, there are like two options. Either it's immediate registrations or delayed registrations. And let's look first at the court dispensation, as you can see in the flow at the very bottom of the chart. So in 2019, we have like so the law has been amended. So they're like equal for the minimum age for marriage, both for men and women, which is 19 years old. Before it was 16. And along with that, the Supreme Court also issued a regulation on some underage marriage requests following the implementation of the law in 2019, which sets the minimum age for marriage for both men and women. So the process of marriage dispensations is centered on children's best interests. Child or children must be present and provided an opportunity to speak in the court. Applicant must also seek advice and obtain like a social report, professional social worker or PEXOS, psychologists, and also the Office of Women Empowerment and Child Protection. And they also involve judge that must hold certification related to women and justice system and the juvenile justice system. And also the administrative requirements include birth certificate, identification, family card, and also proof of school enrollment. And also the application, it's applied by the parents of the children or like the groom and bride to be. And so here, as we can see, so this data is from Badilak, from the Supreme Court. And as we can see, child marriage dispensation cases continue to rise, reaching a peak in 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic. As you can see, it's around 64,000, 63,000. And this is like the finalized marriage dispensation cases. So it's either approved or maybe rejected and so on, and or withdrawn. And what is the marriage dispensations basically? So it's a license to marry granted by the court and to a groom or bride under 19 years old with the completion of some required proceedings. So the data is unfortunately not disaggregated by child marriage status. Since those who are 18 but not 19 yet and want to marry, they need to apply for dispensation. So the study was published as a part of book chapter in Gender Equality and Diversity in Indonesia in 2023. Our methodology follows as a two-step approach. First, we conducted a systematic literature review from 2019 to 2022, and which forms like the core analysis of the study. And to anchor the findings, we analyzed a purposive subset of 360 marriage dispensation decisions or putusan pengadilan, a source from the website or directory of the Supreme Court. Now, like a brief note for the data, while the subset provides like a broad cross-section of judicial reasoning, it is not intended to be statistically representative sample of the entire population. As our literature confirmed with our court decision assessment, so girls and the most vulnerable children continue to characterize the child marriage cases and remain at risk of falling into child marriage. Here from our subset of data, 80% of the child marriage cases included girls who were subjected to marrying an adult man over 18. And in contrast, only 8% of cases involved a boy who were to marry an adult woman. And almost all the application or the marriage dispensation were approved by judges. And also practice of arranged marriage also put girls at more risk than boys based on our literature review. And now, as we can see here, parents' concerns over children's premarital sexual activities and adultery is common across different regions in Indonesia. Such perceived risks for children's moral transgressions seem to be influenced by the gender-biased social norms and religious values, and have shaped the parents' support for early marriage based on our findings. As you can see here, like the top reasons cited by the applicants from our study, from our court decision assessment, or like they're ready to start a family, that their children were seemed ready to start a family, the parents said, and marrying their children did not violate any religious law. And parents' worries about their children committing religious violations. And at the same time, like maybe it's like top four, and the children have seemed to be too intimate, like sudah terlalu akrab, maybe like they're dating for some time. And some studies also note that like some girls who remain single following puberty are labeled as spinsters or perawan tua, as and seen as the burden of the family. The data also suggests like the gap in gender equality and its structural barrier to women empowerment, as most bride-to-be stop their education in junior high school, and most groom-to-be continue to senior high school. However, while almost all groom-to-be reported to be working as main activity, like almost like, but only 20% of the bride-to-be is working as the main activity. But I also want to note that the data that we get from the subset have missing data, as some decisions or like some putusan did not mention or explain the education or the activity of the bride and groom-to-be. Pregnancy leaves girls with no visible solution other than marriage. 37% of our subset data on child marriage cases involve pregnancy, which are mostly approved. And as you can see also, the comprehensive sexual and reproductive health educations based on our literature review is proven to delay marriage and first pregnancy, yet it remains inaccessible in the Indonesian context. And teen pregnancy is still strongly stigmatized in Indonesia, and the stigma applies to both the mother and the child. In some cultures, some single mothers cannot claim their land or like property rights. Studies also confirm parents force their pregnant daughters into marriage, so the child they carry can obtain like legal and social certainty. Protecting the girls from stigma has been used like as the justification from the authorities when child marriage involves pregnancy. Yeah. So marriage, as you can see, like marriage dispensation cases portray like a partial picture of people who married early, but from these measures to prevent child marriage, who are still left behind. Indonesia has shown a strong commitment in addressing child marriage. Like in 2019, it increases the legal age, especially for girls from 16 to 19. And they also have established a national strategy to end child marriage, Strategi Nasional, and which in the strategy addresses the factors often cited as the main drivers of child marriage, like children's capacity and participation, poverty, access to education and other basic services, and also traditional norms and also cultural practices. In 2022, child marriage is criminalized under the law of sexual violence crimes, or UU TPKS. It takes more than legal reform and policy changes to address complex problems like child marriage. Raising the legal age and increasing penalties risks, pushing child marriage underground. So let's look now at the invisible gap. What happens when child marriage occur without registrations? So I'm passing now the opportunity and mic to my colleague Shaila to share her recent study in child marriage registration, particularly in the delayed registration. So now we are moving towards like in the middle part of the flowchart. Shaila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. In Andrea's section, we explored young people who reach the court for dispensation. And now our question remains on who gets left behind when marriage dispensation is used to prevent child marriage. So this 2025 study tried to explore how young people view and experience child marriage registration, so the ones who are immediate through dispensation, and the ones who are not registered or delayed through marriage validation. So we studied two Indonesian regions to provide different contexts and insights to their experiences. The first one is Purwakarta, where it's Muslim majority region with religious court dispensation process. And the other region is the Catholic North Central Timor with district court dispensation. They also have these customary marriage traditions that is paramount for the communities. We interviewed 19 young women who are married before 19 in the two regions. Their experiences range from forced and arranged marriages to relatively independent decisions. We weave their stories into 4 different composite stories that is available in our report. And at the time of the study, there are like 11 of them are unregistered, 7 registered when they reach the legal age, but without court validation. So they only register to either state religious offices or the Stukcapil, the civil registration office, and 1 registered through court dispensation. Our findings resonate what previously have been mentioned by Kak Bella and Kak Andrea, that child marriage is an acceptable solution to the perceived moral and social crisis. And the crisis, as we previously discussed, is still there when we encounter our participants. Communities and families still view unmarried young women as a risk to family reputation, and it's still rooted in harmful patriarchal norms. Limited access to services and unsafe home environment also drive young women to seek safety, and safety is provided through marriage for these girls. For the communities, it's not only acceptable, but also offers immediate relief. And this urgency that keep repeated throughout our interviews are driving their decisions. Next slide. Okay, so this dispensation procedure that we have been discussing is then situated in a social setting where young women and their families seek marriage recognitions to resolve their perceived crisis. Through the marriage law, it is assumed that communities prioritize the state and religious recognition, so they are going to the court to seek for dispensation in order to get social recognition and other benefit that is associated with having marriage certificate. And thus, in this ideal situation, court dispensation can be a tool to prevent child marriage. But next slide, Andrea. Our findings suggest otherwise, so it's not always what happened in the field. Some woman we encounter doesn't really know what court dispensation is, and state registration, in this case, often delayed or skipped because for them, social and cultural recognition comes first. The structural barrier to access the court, including awareness and knowledge about the process itself, exists, and the communities often find workaround. Those who are aware, like Sari here, see court dispensation as too complicated and seen as a hurdle. In her words, young women can be seen considering implications of reaching the court. And in this one, he is considering the implication to their parents of having no documentation to register her marriage. Next slide. So from the two sides, we witnessed how religious and customary marriages are prioritized because it's very immediate. So it answers to the urgency. It's very familiar and socially acceptable, and it provides social legitimacy. So they provide spiritual meaning and social recognitions for the couples and for the families. While on the other hand, the participants see state registration as bureaucratic and costly. They are often delayed, the state registration, until the couple reach marriageable age or have the means to complete the process. The delays can take months to years, and depending on the resources and urgencies for them to secure those documents. Next. So the delays are often associated by the cost associated with conducting each procedure. In the North Central Timor setting, customary processes are central and need to be done before they start to consider or even saving up the resources to reach the church marriage. So even when the local registration office decided to couple church marriage with the civil registration, so they will get immediate documentations, it becomes difficult because they might have like 2 years between the customary to the church marriage. While mostly free, reaching the court for validation, so after they reach the legal age and they want to register and validate their marriage event, it is costly because reaching the court is not easy. Sometimes you need to take some people with you as a witness. And sometimes, more often than not, our participants decided to wait for the mobile court for marriage validation. That happens in villages every few months or years. So the registration, when they consider them, it's also takes long to happen. Next slide. So what happened when they are not registered? This young woman understands the implication of non-registration, and they are experiencing it firsthand. For example, there are expressed difficulties in accessing financial instruments or lending without family cards, and problems with obtaining national health insurance for their children without birth certificates. Without marriage registration, families can actually register birth with only mother's name, but people and our participants chose not to because birth certificates listing only the mother's name often associated with illegitimacy and stigmatized. So they often chose to delay birth registration to avoid the stigma. While women know formal registration unlocks state services later, this delayed benefits also doesn't outweigh the urgent need for social acceptance through familiar ceremonies that happen and lead to child marriage. Last slide, Kat. Okay, so from our study, we learned that this dispensation doesn't address the actual problems that these young women and their families face and help them attain their aspirations. So when they are encountering bureaucratic hurdles like a court dispensation, they often seek workarounds and further marginalizing them from state services and protections, even if it's only a month or few years, or it's still a moment where protection is held back from them. So we must rethink child marriage prevention policy to address the root causes, the unsafe homes, the limited opportunities, and the harmful norms, and not just add the procedural barriers that push vulnerable young women further to the margins. And we will discuss this policy possibilities and potentials with Mbak Agas next.
Thank you, Andrea and Sheila. So just to close this, the two presentations of the findings and also probably open further discussion. This is the takeaways and policy directions and proposed strategies that Puskapa have thought about. So I think from the two studies, we proposed this very one policy directions that we all must consider, that solutions to end or prevent child marriage should strive to address the perceived problems. So both by eliminating the root causes and also offering alternative pathways that are equally swift, accessible, and familiar for young people, for their families, and the community. Um, so if we want to use a very comprehensive systematic approach in the next slide, we feel that it's possible towards advocating for inclusive and empowering policies for young women in early marriage and to end child marriages. Again, this is resonating with Bella's research on the previous law on marriage, and then with the new law, that there are three things that we need to focus on. We want to transform gender, cultural norms, and religious interpretations that actually burden girls and young women. And then we also want to expand access and provision of essential services for young people and their families. Bella has mentioned as well, for example, how education is critical to preventing children, especially girls, from child marriage. And then lastly, as we've been talking about marriage dispensation and registration, legal reforms and procedures have to be swift, accessible, but also familiar for the individual, family, and community. So if we want to expand further on that policy direction, we do and we can center the intervention on child marriage and marriage dispensation. You will see here there's three boxes that we put. But first thing first, marriage dispensation and the registration must be implemented alongside comprehensive prevention and response services. So first, transforming gender norms and then developing awareness can be a preventive measures. And then if marriage has to take place, and hopefully due to the best interest of the child, their dispensation registration can serve as a safeguarding measures for those involved in early marriage, and to also provide the appropriate responses to the crisis that are faced by the young people and the family. So here in the second boxes and the third, we can see how marriage dispensation and registration, if designed and implemented appropriately, it could actually safeguard young people. And then there could be still suitable responses if there are requests for child marriage. So I think we will end here for our presentation, and then we hope that we'll have time more to discuss the findings and the policy recommendations. Just to close the presentation and to celebrate International Women's Day, Puskapa wants to also acknowledge the women that have been involved in Puskapa's advocacy. We're still continuing our advocacy to end child marriage for girls and young women in Indonesia. Again, to our mentor, Dr. Santi Kusumaningrum, who has led the first study, and to our colleague, Dr. Clara Siagian, who has led the 2025 qualitative study, to our junior colleagues that have supported the two studies, and most importantly, to the informants of the young women and men who have shared their stories and experience on child marriage. So thank you very much. And now I'm giving the floor back to Dika to let the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agus, Bella, Andrea, and Shaila. I think your presentations really provide us with a very insightful um, points about the issue of child marriage in Indonesia, and then reflecting based on the reforms going back to 1974 and then 2019. And I think for now, for those of you joining us in Zoom, feel free also to raise your hand if you want to ask your questions directly. I think we'll just start with the questions that are submitted through Zoom. So the first one is from Pak Greg. What roles are religious organizations, especially Ormas Islam, play to reduce underage marriage? So maybe we'll start with that questions. Bella or um, anyone from Puskapa team can start addressing that questions first.
Maybe I can answer it first, and Mbak Agas can continue this one. So, in the 1970s, as far as I know from the literature, most of the Muslim lobby groups, they opposed setting any fixed minimum marriage age for both girls and boys, because there is no teaching in Islam saying about the fixed minimum marriage age. But then most movement among the Islamic group comes from the female ulama, the women's Islamic group. But they also faced some dilemma, because at the same time they also support any policies improving women's lives, but also on another hand, they're also challenged by Muslim scholars who argue that there is no Islamic teaching about the minimum marriage age. About the current condition of the role of Ormas Islam, maybe Mbak Agas or anyone from Puskapa can also contribute.
Thank you. Yeah, so we did interview some grassroots organizations. So it's part of larger Fatayat NU and Muhammadiyah. So they also have various programs that is not only about providing alternative definitions of what child marriage and marriage is, but also empowering young women. So this reach very far to the community, and they also have social reproductive health programs, which is very in line with what we are proposing. But at the same time, there are religious figures at village level that is not part of this organization. So this also part of a broader web. I'm not really sure, and I cannot answer at the moment how they connect with the Amil. So they call it Amil in each villages. They have almost an authority to have a say in marriages in the community. So it is also something that's worth exploring further.
So thank you, Bella and Shaila, and also Pak Greg Fili for the question. The second question is from Ali Aulia Ramli for Andrea. So are there any instances where dispensation applications involve marriages between younger girls and boys who are below 19 years of age as part of your study? Maybe you can say something about the cases.
Yes, thank you, Kadika, and thank you, Mas Ali, for joining and also for your question. So yes, based on our subset of the data, so around 11 or 12% of the child marriage cases. So from 360, around 200 is our child marriage cases. And from those, around 11% of child marriage, both children. And so based on our study, we also take into like to account like how both the children wants to get married. And as we also try to analyze first it's during the pandemic, so 2019, and then 2020 we have the pandemic. And so based on our literature review and also supported by our court dispensation assessment, children perceive marriage also like as an escape or better option. So children can initiate marriage, and then they have been doing so. But then like I think we also need to be careful in rushing the conclusion that children express their wish to be married, the intent, whether the intent comes also for a full agency. But at the same time, like as we can see, like based on my what I said before, that like pregnancy usually go towards marriage. And then also based on our literature review, they want to get married because like it seemed fun. It seemed like, because like as we know, like a pandemic like make the life very hard, and especially also for children and young people. And then like they cannot go to school, they cannot meet their friends, and they, yeah, all of us like stuck in our home, and then like they have hardness and restriction in life, and as well as not to mention like the socio-economic adversities that they have way maybe before the pandemic. So I think it's also maybe like an invitation for all of us, also like to look into as Aga said, that like we need to address also the root cause, like have we make sure that like we make like a better policy like to support the children and young people to be able to enjoy their childhood, their teenagehood, so that like they know like they can have aspiration, they know they can choose whether like to study or maybe to work and so on, and like to see and also like to make sure like to know and to be introduced by various options other than marriage. Yeah. I think I will stop there. Thank you, Kadika. And I hope it answers Mas Ali.
Thank you, Ali, and also Andrea. Pak Budi Reso Sudarmo has three questions, but I think I'm going to break them apart. First question, I think this is more to Bella. Assessing the inclusivity of the law, the minimum marriage age is problematic because it's difficult to isolate the effect of this treatment from other contemporaneous developments, particularly Indonesia's oil boom, which expanded employment opportunities, and also as the IMPRES program, which increased access to primary education. So in this context, the regional exposure may also vary, so the actual impact is uncertain. So what's your thought on that, Bella?
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Dika, and thank you for the question, Pak Budi. Um, I agree that at that time there was also SD Impress program, and we already acknowledged that, and we excluded the sample of women who were directly affected by SD Impress program. So hopefully by limiting the sample size for the cohorts who were not born and who were not fully exposed by the SD Impress, we are minimizing the effect of the SD Impress program. However, regarding the oil boom, I haven't acknowledged this one, and maybe I can use this to improve my paper further. And for the regional exposure, yes, as I explained before, in Indonesia there is a huge range of child marriage across provinces, and I already tried in my paper to distinguish the effect on the areas with entrenched marriage norms, child marriage norms, and in regions where child marriage norms are not very entrenched. But I can polish it further in my paper to assess the regional variety in the child marriage. Thank you.
And the next question, maybe Kagas, you can respond to this. The observations that birth registration is no longer required for school enrollment, and this may reduce the role of the minimum marriage age in facilitating access to education, particularly in regions where customary law remains strong.
Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, from our 2025 research, in some of the region, school enrollment, they still require birth certification of the children, and that has been, like Shella has mentioned in the presentation, one of the driver for them to then actually seek that formal registration through ISBET or without ISBET. So in the case of our study, it still remains valid, and that those are the ones that drive them to get registered. And then there are also, but it might be true for, it might hold for education. It might not then might not be one of the drivers for people to get registered, but there's still other services, social services, particularly like social assistance, that still requires the family card, and that with that requirement of a family card, they still require marriage registration. So I guess it does depend on from region to region, but that's what I understood from our research. Shayla, would you like to add to that from our findings?
Yeah. So yeah, it's I think in our findings, some people also mentioned that in order to graduate, so while enrollment can be done without birth certificate, we see, they also need they are also needed for them to graduate and get the graduation certificates.
So, well, it's on you, Sheila. Maybe you can also answer the questions from Nurfianto Gier Pangidum on does the size of dowry or the tradition of dowry delivery in local culture become an economic driver for families to marry off their children early? Maybe you want to
Okay,
touch on
so
that question first, yeah.
thank you, Kadika. So for the size of the dowry, discussions on the dowry often come secondary after the discussion on marriage. So after they got the first step is the ketuk pintu, so they come to the houses of the young woman. Then it happened there, the discussion on the dowry. Sometimes it is also in our experience, and in the experience of our informants, it's also negotiable. So it's often not the driver to decision to marry, but then the implication after that and what happened next is what the dowry has a role in. In some families, even they can negotiate the payment of dowry further. In one of our informant, they push it further after the church and the formal registration. So the dowry debt still there.
What about the next question, the relationship between the desire to
Yeah.
maintain the integrity of family assets or land in a certain lineage and acceleration of the age of marriage? Do you get this kind of insights from
Yeah.
your qualitative research?
While maybe this is the experience in other contexts, from our interviews, it didn't emerge from our interviews. So there are implications of getting married on who take care of the land and who gets the family assets, but it was not the driver to accelerate marriage to an early marriage.
We also have another question from Alif Imam Zaki. So, according to your findings, to which degree the Indonesian court in the dispensation cases has employed the involvement and input from psychologists and child expert in making the decision? So, this I think really asks the actual implementation. So, maybe Kak Agus or Andrea want to answer this question?
Yes. Thank you, Pak Alif. So okay. So the data, the court decision, as we try to read the decision, the putusan, and also to code it, has various completions. So like some parts are some parts are missing in a way, and I understand that, and also like so but based on the involvement and input from psychologists and child expert, I can answer that, but based on my memory and to be refreshed, looking at the data and all the putusan, they were stated that like they have included like the input from psychologists and child expert, but then again, usually like in the court, in the putusan, or in the court decisions, the reasons of the applicants and the consideration, pertimbangan, and also the reason to be approved are somewhat similar to one another. So again, maybe resonating with what Shaila has explained, that like it's also an administrative work in a way. So again, in our policy key takeaways that Mbak has mentioned, that like it's a good measures to because like marriage dispensation is like the last door to fall into child marriage, like otherwise. And also it's not about whether we need to approve or not, it's not that, but like it's about like how to use that door as a referral to for example, to connect those applicants, to the parents, or maybe to the children, whether they got rejected or they got approved, or maybe they continue the marriage either way, through which pathway, to be like to be connected with other services. So yeah, we hope that like the looking at the system approach, that it needs to be strengthened. So it's not like the judges alone who approve or not, but then like what comes after that? What comes after we know that like the applicant is pregnant and requests for marriage? And then maybe like how to make sure as well, for example, that this pregnant bride to be can continue to educations again. So like I think that's kind of like a missing gaps as well, apart from like the involvement and input from the psychologist and child expert. Yeah. Maybe Margus want to add, if any.
Oh, thank you. I think Andrea has pretty much explained the findings from the analysis that we did in 2022. Just to add a bit, maybe more of like an update, but this is not from the research, but what I remember from our validation meetings and dissemination in the 2025 research study, we've also included informants, well, I mean, like, yeah, not informants, but speakers from Supreme Court, and how they've mentioned that at least now the judges are very much ensured to have gone through trainings, understanding of like the negative implication of child marriage, what they should be considering when they're facing marriage dispensation cases, and then they have to also have certified on understanding on child protection and such. So I think at least, although it's not 100% implemented, at least from this Supreme Court side, they've continued to strengthen the capacity and understanding of those involved in the court decisions regarding child marriage. I think I just wanted to add that they've always been trying to then strengthen the capacity of the judges so that they are upholding the safeguarding yeah, principles of a child's best interest. Thank you.
Is it because part of that national plan, the 2020? Yeah.
Yes, part of it, that is correct. That's correct. So, so there are now more like capacity building training that they're trying to provide to judges in terms of those who are going to handle marriage dispensation case.
Yeah, thank you, Kagas. And the next question is from Romi Hatato. What about the role of social norm or tradition, like bride kidnapping in Lombok, which perpetuates a child marriage? Is there anything to do with that in terms of legal or policy aspect? Shaila?
Yes, sure. So this is the limit of our study. We didn't study Lombok context, so we don't know much about it. But I think the question always that we have to pose to ourselves is where the legal and policy solutions stop and the norm changing effort and interventions should start. So in this menarik tradition, we cannot only rely on marriage dispensation, because it is I think pretty evident that this tradition is held highly in the community. So policy might approach, and national government might approach it in a way that we build a national strategy which is already available on child marriage, and we need to evaluate that, knowing that the practice still happen. Does it translate and distribute the strategy to the community? And I think as an advocate, our question is also, do we have the resources? I think we often use court and legal solution as a quick win, but then do we have the resources to do the alternatives, which I don't think so, with all the cuts and the budget cuts for child protection at the moment. Thank you, Kadika.
And the next question by Pak Terry Hal. Bella, maybe you want to answer this. Does the national curriculum include information about child marriage? At what levels of school, and what is the content?
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Dika, and thank you for the question. So, as far as I know, I also did some research in my another paper about contraceptive knowledge in Indonesia. The national curriculum doesn't include sexual education at any level of education in Indonesia. It's not compulsory to have sexual education. And sexual education in Indonesia is embedded in the biology subject, and biology subject is introduced in the middle school. So even the sexual education is not included, let alone the child marriage education. So usually child marriage maybe is one of the consequences of sexual relationship outside the wedlock or before marriage, and it should be incorporated in the sexual education. But currently there is no sexual education in Indonesia, and as far as I know, child marriage is not introduced. The knowledge about child marriage is not introduced in the curriculum. Maybe the Puskapa team wants to add something. Yeah,
So maybe,
that's enough.
thank you, Bella. We can address another question from Pak Ros. Did your study ask the respondents how they felt in retrospect about having married very young? Maybe you can give some of the examples.
Yes, thank you, Kadika and Paros. So we did employ narrative interviewing. So we try to start from early in their life and see how they want to tell their stories. And this is also part of, I think, this is the value of having qualitative interviewing because it's not a monolith. There is a lot of multiple experiences and responses of being married early. As I mentioned previously, some women feels that they feel liberated because they now have the agency of being married woman, not being the daughter of someone's family. So, but on the other hand, also on the other hand, end of the spectrum, some women also experience in a very heavy way regrets of having married early. So with this varying experiences, I do think that the policy solutions cannot be punitive in a way that some people want to get married because they are happy, as maybe portrayed in many viral videos lately. But there is also facets like this that we have to. So if you want to escape from a negative home environment, can this dispensation or child protection services be the identification point in which we can refer a better solution that is not marriage? Because these things are very unseen in our communities. Thank you, Kat.
Do you want to also address another question by Asina P. Tupulu? So in terms of the dispensation, based on your research, the take is that Indonesian girls being sacrificed for the failings of social policy. So do you have any policy recommendations on how we can overcome this situation?
Mbak Agus, if you want to, I think
No,
it's a lot of
you can,
discussion in Mbak Agus' part on social policies.
yeah, but just thank you. But it's my response will be again highlighting our presentation and what Shaila has mentioned is that we do very much agree that the marriage dispensation and registration alone cannot then solve this issue of child marriage. So again, we stand on that same side of, and then this is the same findings that we had in our 2020, the recommendations we had in our 2022 studies is that there has to be that enabling environment for young people, especially for girls, for them to have other options. So yes, there has to be, like education is already compulsory and it's free, but then again, there's also the norms, especially as Bella has mentioned again, in rural areas, for example, where there's no aspirations towards getting higher education, or sometimes in our 2025 study, we found that they've actually finished the minimum requirement of education, but then they were not able to find any jobs or other employment opportunities. So our policy recommendation stands that there has to be that opportunities that are very much accessible, especially for young women and men in areas with very limited access. So maybe it's common in Jakarta, for example, or other big cities to find jobs. But then if you're in other a bit remote areas, that it's not available there. So we believe that the policy recommendation still on that access to options, to pathways for young women and men to then see other possibilities other than marriage. And then again, social assistance is also one of the other critical access that has to be available to them as well. And then as what Bella has mentioned and other questions related to whether there's curriculum on sexual education, whether there's curriculum on, for example, child marriage, it's not it's here, it's hit and miss, I would say. I mean, like the BKKBN now is a ministry. They've set up, I think, more regulations and supporting that marriage should be above 19 years old. But then it's not a one specific curriculum. But I think and we believe that through education this could be provided. But then again, we see other children who are not education, and that is also that's actually where the policy gap is. We've continue to see children that are vulnerable, that are in the education system, for example, and are still poor, not receiving any services. So the policy recommendation is to be able to then provide this as much many opportunities and services for those who are still not in the system. So maybe just to kind of iterate of what Shella has mentioned and from our presentation as well. Thank you.
And then there's another question from Romy Hatato. If early marriage contributes to inequality, is it justified to grant dispensation merely to legitimize a relationship at the expense of a better future? Anyone wants to tackle that question? I think this goes back to sort of like, is it part of their choice? Is it because of different circumstances? And probably your thoughts, the team from Puskapa, from your qualitative research and then talking to these girls.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a very big question, Kadika. This is also what we are always struggling with, because we think the something that is bad is not the marriage itself, but the circumstances that led to the marriage. I agree. So what is it then, the marriage that we can provide dispensation for? But also, this is not about only legitimizing a relationship. It is legitimizing couples that decided to get married and will continue to get married even when rejected by the court. So the next question of at the expense of a better future, then we need to question, does the court dispensation, rejection, or approvals in itself provide a better future? Because what we are trying to highlight here is it facilitates and sometimes it prevents access to certain services when you don't have marriage registration. This is I think a fact that is experienced not only by women who are married early, but women whose marriage are not registered, which is a bigger, much better question for our basic service professions for Indonesians at large. I think that's my answer, Kadika. Andre.
Maybe it's a nice discussion, and I think I also want to add to talk more also about voluntary child marriage. I remember like during the pandemic, I remember there was like maybe not a campaign, but like to notice like some celebrities, young celebrities, both young, I think, both children like got married. So like I think children who exercise their agency, no matter how thin, like must be also supported, that their decisions does not take away all their education access, all the basic services, and also life opportunities, like like to keep living and thriving. So I think like maybe from the research, from the policy, from the advocacy, we also maybe start discussing about why they want to marry early, like to discuss whether like, is it like because of looking at, okay, there are no future in jobs and so on. So I think it's rather getting the root cause, but at the same time also us as a policy thinkers at the same time also need as well one more thing also to know whether the married children are supported enough, because we know like the intergenerational effect from those who marry early and then they have children that they might marry early as well, and then to know about the socioeconomic situation. So what we understood back in 2022, the evidence around support for married children is lacking. So I think this is also like to note that there also can be some other aspects of child marriage that also we can dig more research together. Yeah. Okay, I will stop from there.
We have another question from Wahyu Triwibowo. As long as dispensation still exists, people may feel encouraged to engage in such behavior. Is it possible to shift our perspective so that by not facilitating it, the behavior becomes less frequent or less reckless? Any
Kadika,
thoughts on
maybe
that?
I'll try to answer
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
Yes, I think this is a very big argument that comes in our discussions with even fellow advocates of child marriage prevention. So does it really then? Because when we encounter our informants in North Central Timor, no one really ever heard about marriage dispensation or marriage law. So in this, for the people where marriage registration is not part of their daily realities and scheme of social recognitions, does it really the solutions so that it becomes less frequent? Which it is possible, but then we need a solution where people in this pockets of population decided to marry and doesn't have legal certainty on the events of their marriage and the birth of their children. So yeah, this is a big question. Maybe a more representative study, quantitative study can answer this one.
Bella, you want to add something?
Yeah, just a little bit. So historically, dispensation was a compromise given by the government to facilitate the strong views of the women's movement and how can I say this? Another conservative view from the Muslim groups who opposed the minimum marriage age. So that's why government had this dispensation to facilitate Muslim groups who agreed that there was no minimum marriage age law under the Islamic teaching. But then, to facilitate these various views in Indonesia, this dispensation continued to be implemented even in 2019. So, I don't know the answer whether it's possible or not to remove this dispensation. It becomes a political agenda to remove this dispensation because of the strong views of the Muslim groups. But yeah, maybe this is the agenda that can be discussed among the people who support elimination of child marriage.
So thank you, Bella. That's our last question. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to invite everyone to join me in thanking Bella, Kak Agus, Andrea, and Shaila for sharing their valuable insights on this very important issue. And thank you for all of you joining us today. It's been wonderful to have you with us. It's the first week after Eid, and then you make time to be with us to really go for deeper thinking on the issue of child marriage in Indonesia. So please do check their work. After this, I think the plan is to also share the speaker's slides, and you will have their contacts. Reach out to them for any additional questions you may have, or if you have some idea for future potential collaboration. And also keep an eye on our website and social media for our upcoming events. For Indonesia Project, our next seminar, we have a couple of them in April, and the upcoming one is on Wednesday, 1st of April. And we'll discuss the crowding out effects of public health insurance rollout in Indonesia. You can see that in your screen for the other events in April. So we hope to see many of you there. Until then, have a great day and a wonderful week ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mbak Dika and everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.